First year expectations for Josh McDaniels with the Las Vegas Raiders. Last season, the Raiders finished with a 10-7 record. They made it to the playoffs where they were defeated by the Bengals in the wild card round. This was a team that overcame a lot of adversity last year. You had the incident with Henry Ruggs, John Gruden. Then they had a cold stretch where they just went absolutely cold and they just looked like they were done. But then out of nowhere, late November, which I tell you guys all the time, late November after Thanksgiving is where the real NFL season begins. That's where we start to see teams separate themselves. This is where we start to see playoff teams separate themselves. And this is where we start to see the pretenders separate themselves from the contenders. And the Las Vegas Raiders were one of those teams that ended up getting really, really hot the end of November and the whole entire month of December. And they ended up finding a way to get into the playoffs. You look at the hiring of Josh McDaniels. Initially, everybody was like, okay. I mean, this was a long time coming. We knew that Josh McDaniels eventually was going to get another head coaching gig because, as we already know, his first head coaching gig with the Denver Broncos, also another AFC West team, didn't go well. And his only couple of seasons as the head coach in Denver, he had a 11-17 record. And where did Josh McDaniels go wrong the first time he was a head coach? Well, first of all, he was very young. He was inexperienced. And on top of that, he made a lot of mistakes. He tried to run the Broncos as if he was in New England. And of course, that's where a lot of Bill Belichick disciples and a lot of coaches from the Bill Belichick coaching tree go wrong because they try too hard to replicate what Bill Belichick does to be successful in New England, and they never try to become their own person. For Josh McDaniels in Denver, he was trying to be Bill Belichick 2.0, pretty much. And it didn't work out because, you see, the reason why the Bill Belichick coaching way works is because he wins. You see, it's easy to get players on board with whatever you're doing and whatever you're trying to implement when you win. But when you're losing, the Bill Belichick coaching way doesn't really work. So for Josh McDaniels, that's ultimately, one of the reasons why he failed in Denver the first go around. However, it seems like he has learned from his mistakes. He's had a lot of years since to reevaluate himself and improve not only as a coach, but as a person. Because being a head coach is more than just about how much you know about X's and O's and whatnot. It's also about being a leader of men, a leader of grown men, as a matter of fact. So there has to be a level of respect. And you also have to be willing to put your ego aside. Josh McDaniels wasn't really able to do those two things his first go around in Denver. Now with the Las Vegas Raiders, he's learned. Hopefully he's matured. And with him having a lot of time sitting back as the OC for New England, hopefully he has improved in all of those areas. Because he's going to a Raiders team that does have a good amount of talent on the offensive side of the football. The offensive line is probably the biggest concern that I have. But you look at the receiver position, although it's not a lot of proven depth behind Davante Adams, you got him, who you just recently traded for from the Green Bay Packers. Probably the best receiver in the NFL, depending on who you ask. Then you have Darren Waller, who is probably one of the three best tight ends that we have in the league, along with Travis Kelce and George Kittle. Darren Waller also is in that conversation. Then you have Derek Carr. Derek Carr is coming off a really good season. You probably could consider Derek Carr a top 10 quarterback based on how he performed last season, because I think that the sole reason why Las Vegas was able to get into the playoffs was because of the play of Derek Carr. And Derek Carr doesn't have the greatest numbers when you go back and you look at the 2021 season for Derek Carr. Not really crazy, spectacular numbers, but the numbers don't show the impact that Derek Carr had for this team. In big moments and big games late in the season, Derek Carr stepped up and made those big plays. And if he had a better group of wide receivers than what he had last season, he probably could have put up even better numbers. This season, with the addition of Davante Adams, and hopefully you get Darren Waller able to stay fully healthy, then you have Third and Renfro there. Derek Carr could put up some video game numbers this season. And I'm not saying he's going to have a MVP caliber season. However, he should be able to put up Pro Bowl caliber numbers. let's not forget, you still do have Josh Jacobs, who the Raiders declined the 5th-year option for. And it's not because Josh Jacobs is a bad back, in my opinion. Maybe they just feel like he doesn't fit what they want to do long-term offensively. However, I think you could consider Josh Jacobs to be a pretty solid halfback. And some of you guys may even consider him to be a top 10 halfback. And if you do, I'm not going to argue with you on that. But the defense side of the football is where a lot of the questions are going to lie. Because as we already know, the Raiders defense has been pretty terrible for over the last decade and some change. However, last season, their defense did kind of hit a turning point. And although the defense wasn't great, it was okay. Under Gus Bradley, he did what he needed to do. The defense was good enough to get them to the playoffs, and the defense also made a couple of plays. However, the secondary has kind of been a big hindrance for why the Raiders have struggled to have success long-term on the defense side of the football. But you do have Chandler Jones, who you brought in, and you also have Max Crosby. So that's one of the best pass rushing duos that we have in the NFL. Then on top of that, you bring in Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator. This was a huge get for Josh McDaniels, and I did not see this coming. I thought that Patrick Graham was going to end up being the defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And for those of you guys listening who are like, JT, who the heck is Patrick Graham? Patrick Graham was the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants under former head coach Joe Judge. And if you go back and you look at the statistics, last year on the New York Giants defense, they're probably not going to be all that great. But that's not reflective of Patrick Graham. The reason why the numbers may be kind of skewed is because the Giants offense stunk last season. They were going 3-and-out, and if they didn't go 3-and-out, they either had a turnover. They had Jake Fromm starting at quarterback. They had pretty much everybody starting at quarterback. I could have played quarterback for the Giants. You could have played quarterback for the Giants. Your grandpa probably could have played quarterback for the Giants as well. The Giants offense was a complete mess, and they put their defense in a lot of tough situations. And eventually, the defense ended up getting tired. They ended up getting gassed. Do you know how annoying it is to be playing on the defense side of the football? You get a stop, and then 3 seconds later, you're right back on the field. It's so annoying. And for Patrick Graham, I knew it had to be really annoying. So him going to the Las Vegas Raiders is going to be a really good spot for him. And it's a really huge get for Josh McDaniels. And I was really surprised that he opted to decide to end up going to the Raiders, simply for the fact that the Steelers probably had a little bit more talent to work with. And there were probably a couple of other teams that were also in the running for Patrick Graham. So that kind of shows you that he believes in Josh McDaniels. He believes in what Josh McDaniels is trying to build with the Las Vegas Raiders. On top of that, what you're getting out of Patrick Graham, you're getting somebody who is really smart. You're getting somebody who pays attention to the details. And like I mentioned when it comes to Kevin O'Connell, somebody who pays attention to the small things nobody really notices, but they add up into big things. And for Patrick Graham, you're going to have somebody who is going to maximize the current talent that the Raiders have on the defense side of the football. Although they do have a lot of holes that they need to address, he's going to find a way to build the best defense possible with what he has. And his defense is pretty complex. I remember, who was it? Was it Logan Ryan? It might have been Logan Ryan who appeared on the Herd, Colin Cowherd's show on FS1 last year. And he was talking about how complex Patrick Graham's defense is and how it takes a little bit of a learning curve to really get acclimated to it. I kind of like hearing that. And I think that's kind of what Josh McDaniels likes about Patrick Graham also, is about how complex his defense is, because in New England, everything is always about details. Everything is always about trying to get the small advantage over your opponent when it comes to a strategic standpoint. And Patrick Graham probably may be one of the most strategic defensive coordinators that we have in the league. Like, you listen to some of the former players that have been coached by Patrick Graham, and they say this guy, his defense is super complex, super nuanced, and it's really all about intricacies, and it's all about the small things, doing the small things right. I really like that. And it's a big reason why I'm pretty high on the Las Vegas Raiders this year. And I'm going to give you guys a spoiler alert. I don't think the Raiders are going to finish in last place in the AFC West this season. I'm not going to tell you who is, but I'm just going to say that the Raiders aren't going to be finishing in last place. And although it may be hard to believe, because you're probably going to be like, well, JT, they're not as talented as the Broncos, Chargers, and the Chiefs. I understand that. However, I really like the coaching staff. And having a good coaching staff can take you a long way, because if you have a great coaching staff, you're going to be able to make up for the lack of talent that you may have in certain areas, because you can make up for it by strategizing, trying to minimize your weaknesses and maximize your strengths. That's part of being a great coach. For Josh McDaniels, we know what he's going to do on the offensive side of the football. His offenses were pretty solid when he was the head coach at Denver. We already know what he's done as the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. We knew that Josh McDaniels was going to get another opportunity for being another head coach for another organization. He had the opportunity to be the head coach for Indianapolis. He ended up going back to New England. Still did a pretty good job there. Very phenomenal job with Mac Jones. Did a good job with Cam Newton the previous season. He knows offense. We're not worried about that. And I think your defense, led by defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, is going to be in good hands. As a matter of fact, if you are a Raiders fan, this is the best defensive coordinator that you have probably had in decades. And I'm only 20 years old, so I don't know who the other great defensive coordinators the Raiders have had over the years, but I do know that Patrick Graham is probably the best one that you have had in a decade. So you guys let me know what are your first year expectations for Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders, because for me, I think this team is going to be ultra competitive. I definitely feel like they're going to be around 8 to 10 wins this season. They definitely could eclipse 10 wins this year, but I'm not trying to give out no early record predictions, but this is definitely a team that has a better shot at making it to the postseason than what a lot of people are giving them credit for, because there's another coach in this division that has a lot to prove. And I'm not really all that high on him. And you guys can take a guess, but he's going to be the last coach that we talk about. But I'm really high on Josh McDaniels. I'm big when it comes to giving people second chances, because sometimes we have to look back on life and look back at where we went wrong and learn from our mistakes. You know, sometimes not everything in life is a L. Sometimes L's are actually lessons. And maybe Josh McDaniels having his first tenure as head coach for the Broncos going wrong may be a blessing in disguise, because it was a lesson. So hopefully he can learn from that, improve on that, and end up being the guy that the Las Vegas Raiders are looking for at head coach, because the Raiders have been going through head coaches over the last couple of years. And even then, John Gruden didn't really do all that much as the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. He just got this big long-term deal and didn't do anything. No playoff appearances, barely even had to win the season. I don't even think he had to win the season. Somebody let me know. I don't have the John Gruden stats in front of my face, but I think that Josh McDaniels definitely could do some big things with the Las Vegas Raiders. The talent's there. You have a really good defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham. I think the Raiders could be a really solid football team this season, but you guys let me know. I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Make sure you check out the JT Sports Podcast. Every video that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on every single podcasting platform. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And I will see you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast shortly.